This is a CNBC original.
In this episode of American Greed, he's young, self-assured, and loaded.
The cars and the houses and the money, he was living a pretty fast-paced life.
Tony Elgindy claims to be a crusader, fighting fraud on Wall Street.
He wanted to be known as the greatest short seller of all time. He wanted that following.
He had a persona that he cultivated, a bad guy going good.
But this so-called good guy is running an insider trading scam, and his partner in crime is a crooked FBI agent.
This wasn't a crusade for good, it was a crusade for evil.
The rise and fall of Anthony Elgindy begins in San Diego, California. In 1988, this Egyptian-American is a 20-year-old college dropout selling sports cars. He likes the job and makes decent money pulling in a few grand a month. But one day, fate shows him another, more appealing path.
A stockbroker came in with this gorgeous young woman on his arm and was going to buy a Corvette. And this guy from the stockbrokerage world claimed to be making $20,000 a month. And suddenly Tony thought, gee, why sell cars? I should try to be selling stock.
After pounding the pavement for months, the dropout finds a brokerage house willing to take a chance on him. It's a firm with a bit of a reputation called Blinder Robinson. Some employees are seen here in this 1980s video.
They became known as Blind 'em and Rob 'em. They made markets and basically promoted their own in-house stocks, and that's pretty much all they wanted you to recommend to your customers.
It's a pump and dump operation, also known as a boiler room. Brokers make high-pressure sales pitches to investors, pumping up worthless stock. After the price soars, the brokers sell their shares. When the share price plummets, investors who hold on suffer huge losses. Blinder Robinson is not the most credible way to launch a career. But Tony Elgindy is hooked.
He was sort of bitten by the stock bug, and he wanted to stay in the securities business. Got his securities licenses along the way.
But just months after he joins, Blinder Robinson's founder, Meyer Blinder, is investigated for racketeering and securities fraud. He's eventually sent to prison, and the firm is liquidated. Elgindy finds a position at another firm, Armstrong McKinley, but trouble follows. Federal investigators suspect brokers at Armstrong of taking bribes to promote stock they wouldn't otherwise recommend. Elgindy talked about it in a 1997 television interview.
Instead of recommending IBM, Ford, General Motors to their customer, now they have an extra payment, extra incentive to recommend something they normally wouldn't recommend.
It's looking like Elgindy is 0 for 2. Both firms he's worked for in his short career have been shut down by the feds. He turns federal informant and avoids charges.
He was apparently quite helpful to the feds, but it really was his first close, I think, brush with the federal criminal justice system.
He decides his pump and dump days are over.
He said later that he sort of got sickened by that process where there were so many overvalued, overhyped, fraudulent stocks being sold.
In 1995, Elgindy starts over. He opens up shop in Dallas, Texas, and starts trading, but this time as a short seller. Rather than hoping the price of shares go up, short sellers bet on the price of stock to fall, and the bigger the drop, the more money they make. Elgindy is a new man now with a new career and a new mission. Al-Gindi wants to expose puffery, hype, and fraud, or at least that's what he starts out doing. He begins to post diatribes on trading websites like SiliconInvestor.com, giving his opinions about which stocks are overvalued and why.
Tony was very good at doing reports.
Traders, including Jeff Mitchell, sit up and take notice.
I invested in some stock, and Anthony comes along and says, your company is 4 streaks on the toilet bowl. Naturally, that gets you thinking, uh-oh, did I make a mistake here?
Al-Gindi's brash tone is entertaining. He becomes so popular, he starts his own thread called Dear Anthony.
Tony came on and he says, these companies I'm going to discuss are bad companies. I deal with overhyped, overvalued, fraudulent, promoted, spammed, or suspect equities. And no one had really done that side of the market before. So right away, he offered something different that we hadn't seen on message boards.
The ability to go online and rant and rave and educate and insult and also possibly make huge amounts of money doing it was like a narcotic for Tony. It was just like the best thing in the world for him.
But Al-Gindi's rants make him a target.
Short selling, and especially the world of penny stocks, had always been sort of the dark underbelly of Wall Street. It was a world where brokers looked like bouncers, where you had organized crime, shady dealings, all kinds of different things going on. It was a world far and off the lush Park Avenue offices of Wall Street.
In 1997, Al-Gindi sits down with the primetime news program. He claims that his short selling has put him on a mob hit list.
I received a bullet in the mail. A bullet with my name on it. 300-pound guys walking into an office, beating you up, making you do this, do this. It's happening. It's happening on Wall Street. That's not going to happen to me.
But Al-Gindi's biggest threat isn't the mob, it's the FBI. When American greed returns, see how a do-gooder turns bad.
There was always that risk, you knew about Tony, that was he going to cross the line somehow?
In 1998, 31-year-old Anthony Al-Gindi has made a name for himself as a short seller with a mission. He claims to expose overhyped companies, and that's what he does, at least for now. He makes money betting that their stock prices will fall. Traders love Al-Gindi, but companies fear him. With just a few keystrokes, his brash, caustic comments can send a stock tumbling down.
He was a kind of a boisterous character, very funny. It was kind of a show. It was entertaining. To be in the site would be, there was a lot of entertainment value in addition to the information that was coming through.
Mead was at 60, now it's 45.
High on his newfound fame, in 1999, Al-Gindi launches AnthonyPacific.com. Subscribers to the site pay $600 a month for access to Al-Gindi's tips and trades. Dan Cohen is one of Al-Gindi's subscribers.
It wasn't just him. It was really the collective, several hundred people sharing information and sharing the research. One after another was exposed as being a fraud. And eventually the prices went down. If you could hold a position and manage the risk, you'd make money. The culture of the site was truth and honesty.
Al-Gindi claims to be a former fraudster gone straight. He once worked for a notorious boiler room, doing pump-and-dump schemes. Using the logic that it takes a thief to catch a thief, he says he's the perfect person to root out fraud.
Tony was able to sniff them out because he had seen 100 of them before, and they all followed the same recipe.
Al-Gindi relishes his role as a supposed fraud fighter, and he even posts online video of his investigations. In one, he exposes a company that claims to have developed a new technology to remove sulfur from fuel. It sends out hyped-up press releases. Its share price soars from 25 cents to nearly $12. El-Guindy tours the research and development lab and captures a less than sophisticated demonstration on tape.
We take oil and water, we mix them, put it in a beaker, and this is how it all started. Bam, that's it.
You're just making fun of this device that had all these like foil and wires and all that sort of stuff. And I thought that was really sort of, in a way, funny, or brave.
Life couldn't be better. He's a success. People respect him. And he's raking in more than $1 million from subscribers' fees and claims to be making $75,000 a month on trades. He lives in an upscale neighborhood north of San Diego and splurges on a fleet of high-end luxury cars, decked out in personal flair, a zero-bid license plate.
When a company goes to zero, when the bid's zero, it means that the stock is worthless. So, and that's how he was paid for the car, was by selling stocks that were going to go to zero.
Tony had a Ferrari. He had several cars, all fire engine red. He loved red cars. Lived the life of a pretty well-to-do guy. He was only in his, early 30s?
He needed to feed an image that he was this powerful guy making all this money. The cars and the houses and the money and the limo drivers, he was living a pretty fast-paced life.
The huge house and fast cars are nice, but what he craves is building the perfect image. El-Guindy claims to be a philanthropist.
Welcome back to our coverage of the crisis in Kosovo.
In 1999, he goes on MSNBC to talk about his humanitarian efforts to help refugees from Kosovo.
Mr. El-Guindy, let me start with you.
And in true El-Guindy fashion, he braves the war-torn areas of Kosovo, aiding refugees and helping some to the U.S.
I was on vacation in Hawaii at the time, and I made a decision that I would fly out there and postpone my own business concerns for a temporary period of time to see what it is that I could do to help.
He was always trying to help the little guy and do the right thing and be a good person. It was kind of within his character that it wouldn't be enough for him to just write a check to the Red Cross, which is what an ordinary person would have done. He wanted to have the cash in his pocket and go to the refugee camp and hand the money to the needy people.
Though he raises $48,000, questions arise about just how much goes to refugees and just how much goes into El-Guindy's pockets.
This is a message that Tony wrote about Kosovo.
El-Guindy attempts to justify his actions in a lengthy online post. He rambles on about how his small cash donations make a huge difference to the refugees. And in an effort to prove his goodwill, he includes dozens of letters from those he helped. But he grows tired of dodging accusations. He turns his attention to the website, AnthonyPacific.com, where he's appreciated, and puts all of his energy into making it even bigger and better. Business thrives. In 2 years, he rakes in nearly $3 million in subscribers' fees. Online, El-Guindy gloats about the rapport he's building with law enforcement agencies and boasts about initiating new federal investigations.
In Tony's own mind, he was sort of a quasi-law enforcement official himself doing what he did. So he liked talking to those kind of people and giving them information that, he thought they could use that would be helpful.
In 2000, El-Guindy meets a 37-year-old FBI agent named Jeff Royer. Before long, El-Guindy and Royer forge an unusual relationship. It's a relationship that changes the mission of Anthony Pacific from being above board to breaking the law. On the clock, Royer investigates crimes on an Indian reservation in Gallup, New Mexico. But after hours, he works Elgindy's investigations. And what he's doing is highly unorthodox, if not illegal. Elgindy gives Royer the names of companies that he thinks might be perpetrating fraud. Royer runs the information through restricted, highly confidential FBI databases to see what the feds have on the company. Royer speaks to American Greed in a telephone interview.
I would go on the computers in the FBI, and I would search for that company. I would search for the president, vice president, CEO, CFO, whatever. I would do a complete search and see if there was any SEC or FBI activity on this case.
As an FBI agent, he had the sort of keys to the whole law enforcement library of what federal law enforcement was doing. It was everything from the write-ups of interviews with the witnesses, descriptions of how investigations were being conducted, descriptions of sources, people that were providing information to the government.
If he discovers inside information, he funnels the news to Elgindy.
The truth was that he was stealing information from the FBI, and they were using that information to target specific companies for short selling, stock price manipulation, and extortion.
In 2000, Elgindy believes there's fraud taking place at Seaview, a company pitching underwater cameras. Royer taps into FBI databases and discovers an ongoing probe into the Florida-based business for issuing deceptive press releases. He passes the tip to Elgindy. Now, armed with information only investigators would know, Elgindy shorts the stock and tells his Anthony Pacific subscribers to do the same.
It was integral to the scheme that the site subscribers trade on the stock because this is a short selling scheme. And the idea is that the short selling combined with the eventual publication to the general public of negative information can push down the price of the stock.
After Elgindy's attack, Seaview's stock plummets more than 70% of its value in 90 days. Eventually, the SEC files suit against the company. But not before Elgindy boasts about making out with $750,000 in a single trade. It's not pretty, it's not nice, and it's not legal. Next, on American Greed, does Elgindy have the ultimate inside tip and profit on a national tragedy?
There are disturbing new developments that a notorious trader...
This person may actually have known of the attacks.
By 2001, Anthony Elgindy, a trader, is living the American dream. He's living a life of luxury and basking in internet fame. But it's all about to end. On September 11th, the world is shocked by the devastating attacks that left nearly 3,000 people dead. The markets go dark for more than a week. As crews sift through the ashes of Ground Zero, hoping to identify the remains of victims, the government follows every conceivable lead. The Department of Justice turns to Wall Street, looking for potential profiteers of this merciless act.
There was a task force that was put together after 9/11 to investigate whether or not anybody had traded in advance of 9/11 with potential knowledge of the 9/11 events.
The FBI fields a number of tips, including one from a San Diego broker who says his client, Anthony Elgindy, wanted to liquidate his accounts the day before the 9/11 attacks.
This broker contacted the FBI and had explained that this Egyptian stock trader had requested to liquidate these accounts and that the market was done. That's what triggered these events that brought us into the investigation.
Dave Shavs is a supervisory special agent with the FBI and launches an investigation into Elgindy.
We began by taking an aggressive look at his trading records, telephone records, wire transfers, monitoring internet traffic.
Agents go undercover, posing as subscribers on AnthonyPacific.com. But instead of finding ties to terrorism, agents notice something else. Elgindy's reporting sensitive information on his website that only FBI agents would know.
We could start to see postings that a government official had reported that XYZ company or an individual, a principal or CEO of a company was in trouble with the federal government. He would use that information knowing the direction of the case that the FBI was involved in it.
Shavs and his team follow a trail of phone records, emails, and wire transfers. And it leads them back to the FBI, to Jeff Royer, an agent in Gallup, New Mexico.
It was extremely unusual for someone that works in Gallup, New Mexico, who works crimes on American Indian reservations, to have queried nearly 3,000 companies when he has no business doing so. That immediately gave us pause and concern for what Mr. Royer was doing.
Not knowing the full scope of Royer's relationship with the internet trader, the FBI interviews the New Mexico-based agent. Royer speaks with American Greed by phone.
They wanted to know what files I had looked at. They wanted to know what my relationship with Tony Elgindy was, how exactly the information was flowing, the computer checks, telephone calls. They ask it all.
Royer maintains he's done nothing wrong. He says he's sharing information because he's working a source. But the government sees it differently.
It's a one-way street. You provide information to the government doesn't provide information to you. And that was clearly completely outside the mission of Mr. Royer, completely outside the mission of the FBI. And it was clear from that that this wasn't a crusade for good. It was a crusade for evil.
To Royer, the writing's on the wall. His FBI days are over. 1 week after the interview with the feds, he turns in his badge and packs his bags for the sandy shores of San Diego, where he goes to work for Elgindy full-time. But as the FBI learns, the job offer was part of the plan all along. Elgindy has promised Royer a job and a portion of his trading profits in exchange for access to his FBI files.
I think Elgindy always used Royer for the information flow from the FBI. He actually postponed his hire date on several occasions so that he could continue to get that information. It was only when we started to speak to Royer that he decided he was going to resign now instead of face the inquiry that was about to take place.
To the FBI, it appears that Agent Royer is leaking confidential FBI information on white-collar crime to Elgindy.
Royer would identify companies that were under investigation in the FBI, convey that to Mr. Elgindy. Mr. Elgindy would take a position, his site members would take a position, and then that information would be broadcast throughout the internet, collectively to create this negative sentiment towards these stocks.
And even though Royer's left the FBI, he keeps the scam running. He has a mole on the inside, his girlfriend, FBI agent Lynn Wingate. The petite blonde takes over where Royer left off and keeps the information flowing and the scam running. Shavs is stunned to learn of a second agent on the take.
We we're a little blown away with that, because now the case is kind of creating a larger circle. We didn't know how extensive this was. It was bad enough one of our own was involved, but now we have a second agent that could be involved.
The FBI estimates that with the information Royer and Wingate have supplied him, Elgindy has pocketed more than $3 million. He's cashing in and boosting his internet status.
Making himself look good was very important to him because it enabled him to manipulate his site members into trading at his instruction and gave him increased visibility and increased seeming importance with respect to the markets.
And, never one to let any opportunity slip by, he's found another way to use his insider knowledge: blackmail. In one instance, Royer feeds Elgindy information that the CEO of Nuclear Solutions, Paul Brown, has a criminal record. It's like a pot of gold. By law, CEOs of publicly traded companies must disclose their criminal history. Elgindy broadcasts the information, shorts the Nuclear Solutions stock, and tells his website subscribers to do the same.
And then through a series of threatening telephone calls and contacts, essentially Mr. Brown was given the proposition that either he, makes Mr. Elgindy go away by providing him free stock or very low-cost stock, or he will see his company destroyed.
Desperate to get Elgindy off his back, the CEO agrees to give him 350,000 shares in exchange for dropping the virtual attack.
The CEO essentially gave in to the extortion demands, gave a block of stock to Elgindy, and Elgindy then shared the block of stock with the other subscribers who had also short sold.
As the FBI uncovers the Elgindy scheme and the scope of the conspiracy grows, so does the urgency to stop Elgindy. During the course of its investigation, the FBI learns Elgindy has wired $350,000 to a bank in Lebanon.
He had transferred money to Lebanon. He'd bought an apartment in Lebanon. He'd opened a securities account where his address was listed as being in Lebanon.
The pressure mounts for investigators. They fear Elgindy may be preparing to run. And the Bureau has a leak. FBI agent Lynn Wingate.
She apparently had gone on the computer like in May and saw that I was actually being a target of investigation. That's when she called me, told me that I should distance myself from Tony. That's all she told me. And she would prefer it if I came home and just got away from him.
Up next on American Greed, Elgindy takes on a new identity and makes a break for it.
He was stopped by TSA, who questioned him, and he proceeded to tell a string of lies.
For more than 6 months, the FBI has been watching short seller Anthony Elgindy and former FBI agent Jeff Royer. The two were working together to steal confidential information from FBI files. They are using that information to cash in with an insider trading scam. Elgindy, once a car salesman, now has his own Hummers, Ferraris, and a mansion. But his run is about to come to an end. The FBI knows he's stealing information and trading on it. Agents make their move to bring him down. On May 22, 2002, Elgindy is arrested at his office near San Diego. Jeff Royer is arrested at a friend's office.
I was down talking on the phone, looking out, saw my friends, the SWAT team, enter like a side of another building or run up the alleyway. I said, it's kind of cool. Our SWAT team's here doing something at a place next door, and next thing I know, they're right in front of us, and I'm in cuffs.
Investigators raid the homes and offices and find more evidence to support their suspicions.
We found hundreds of documents from our database, sensitive, top secret, secret classifications, information that in the wrong hands could be damaging to the FBI. We found a number of criminal checks on various presidents of companies, CEOs, and other executives.
Elgindy and Royer, along with Royer's girlfriend, FBI agent Lynn Wingate, are charged with insider trading, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. For Elgindy, an Arab American, the timing couldn't be worse. The country is still reeling from the 9/11 attacks.
One of the prosecutors raises the information in which he alleges that Anthony Elgindy had pre-knowledge of 9/11, and not only didn't he report it, he tried to profit from it.
The news causes a media storm.
There are disturbing new developments that a notorious traitor.
This person may actually have known of the attacks.
It was hard to imagine in early 2002 to say anything worse about somebody in the United States than that they may have known in advance about the 9/11 attacks and that their only reaction was to try to profit from it in the stock market.
Eventually, the firestorm calms down. Elgindy is not charged with profiting from 9/11, and his attorney vehemently denies he knew anything about the attacks.
It is racial profiling. Anyone that's from the Middle East now is, you know, the government suddenly is looking at them. It was just common knowledge that the market was falling, that funds weren't even liquidated till September 18th.
Elgindy posts bail of $2.5 million. He's free for now. He's looking at up to 20 years in prison. Prosecutors are preparing to take their case to trial when Elgindy makes a break for it.
I got a call from the FBI telling me that he'd been arrested by state authorities or local authorities in Long Island.
Airport authorities stop the embattled short seller as he attempts to pass through security using a fake ID.
He was going through, and his ticket had this other name, Manny Velasca, and he presented his ID, which I believe was a Montana identification.
He might have made it as Manny, but he's forgotten something. He's just come from a visit with his lawyer. He has a visitor pass with his real name, Tony Elgindy, on it. The TSA agent notices the discrepancy.
Mr. Elgindy tried to deceive the officer by telling her that, in fact, Elgindy was the person he was visiting. And then he provided a false story saying that he was a jeweler.
They search his belongings and come across his real ID.
The officer pulled out his driver's license from California that had Mr. Elgindy's name on it and said to Mr. Elgindy, Manny, you want to tell us who you are? And at that point, Mr. Elgindy sort of dropped his head and eventually admitted that he was not Manny Velasca.
Authorities also discover Elgindy's traveling with $30,000 in jewels, $25,000 in cash, and dozens of blank checks. In a Brooklyn courtroom on November 1st, 2004, opening arguments begin in the insider trading trial of Anthony Elgindy and Jeff Royer. Prosecutors allege that Elgindy used his Anthony Pacific site, or AP, to get his followers to do his bidding, much like a criminal gang leader.
The AP site was the engine of the conspiracy. It was the enterprise of the conspiracy, and site members, wittingly or not, were participants in the conspiracy.
Trading on FBI secrets was only the first part of the scam. Elgindy made his trades much more lucrative by getting his legions of followers to short a stock too. Through his website, he was driving down prices, manipulating the market.
This particular conduct was coordinated in a way that was meant both to take advantage of the information to target the companies, but also to take advantage of the way of releasing this information and coordinated trading in a way that it could put maximum pressure on thinly traded stocks.
Dan Cohen, an Elgindy supporter, is prepared to take the stand until he gets cold feet.
An article in the Wall Street Journal quoted the prosecutor saying that any members of Tony's site that testified at the trial from the U.S. government's perspective would be self-incriminating themselves.
The case turns to the defense. Former FBI agent Jeff Royer takes the stand. He says his motivation for sharing FBI secrets with Elgindy was pure. He was trying to help the FBI on its own criminal case.
Well, I thought my job as an FBI agent was to get as much information as I could to shut these companies down and to stop the stock fraud. I don't know why that's so hard for people to understand, and the government just wasn't buying it. I didn't make a single penny on it. I never asked him for a penny. There wasn't really any financial quid pro quo.
The defense team also points out that the majority of companies that Elgindy publicly attacked with highly confidential information are in fact involved in fraud. In other words, Anthony Elgindy was simply doing what he claimed to do, exposing shady companies and shorting their stocks. The government isn't buying it. Whether the companies were fraudulent or not, Elgindy still tried to manipulate the market.
He used that privileged access to take advantage of his position, to sell, and of course for each sale there's a buyer on the other side who's now got a stock that you know is a scam and you're laughing all the way to the bank. So yeah, some of the information that was right, much of it was right. Much of these companies were scams, but Mr. Elgindy had no right to take advantage of his personal FBI agent to get that information and disadvantage the other market participants.
Next on American Greed, the internet stockbroker makes a final trade, swapping a life of luxury for one behind bars. After 3 long months of trial, the fate of Anthony Elgindy, the notorious short seller, lies in the hands of a jury.
We're just learning that Dow Jones reports a verdict has been reached in the criminal trial of Anthony Elgindy.
On January 24, 2005, the jury finds Elgindy guilty on charges of insider trading, racketeering, and extortion. His FBI sidekick, Jeff Royer, is also convicted on securities fraud, racketeering conspiracy, and obstruction of justice charges. American Greed speaks exclusively to Royer from federal prison by telephone.
I think the story that they were trying to tell and the reaction was getting from the juries that they were buying the government side to it. It didn't surprise me, the verdict, when they read it. Obviously crushing because I knew what it was going to mean.
It means time behind bars for both Royer and Elgindy. In June 2006, Elgindy makes his final appearance in a Brooklyn federal courtroom. He makes a plea for leniency and seems to do more harm than good.
To the very end, Mr. Elgindy, who went on for an hour talking about himself, his ego got the better of him, as I think it did throughout the time that he was involved in the securities industry. His narcissism, his ego, his desire to be front and center, to inflate himself at the expense of others, was communicated through the trial and through sentencing to the judge, and he gave him a sentence that indicated that.
Elgindy is sentenced to 11 years behind bars.
The judge afterwards called Mr. Elgindy a master manipulator. He said that in all of the years that he's been a judge or a lawyer, Mr. Elgindy was perhaps the most manipulative person that he'd run across.
After taking home $364,000 from insider trades, Elgindy must pay back $1.5 million for his role as leader of the conspiracy. He must forfeit his possessions, including his glamorous home. Prison officials denied a request from American Greed to interview Elgindy. Elgindy's co-conspirator, rogue FBI agent Jeff Royer, is convicted of stealing confidential FBI information and gets 6 years in prison. It seems his only regret is not taking a plea.
I had no idea that the sentencing would be that rough. I was thinking, because I was offered a 3-year plea if I would have taken a plea early on. Offered 3 years, and I had no clue I was going to get 6 years.
In all, 6 others are charged in the conspiracy and plead guilty, including FBI agent Lynn Wingate. The federal agents and prosecutors who worked the case are saddened that Royer, one of their own, was corrupted.
The conduct of this one agent tarnishes the badge of the FBI. We don't find people like this. They find us. And although there's a very strict hiring process here in the Bureau, no matter where you are in corporate America or elsewhere, every once in a while you're going to have somebody that comes in that doesn't have the right intentions.
But they say, ultimately, the case reassures them that the system works.
This scam may have gone on for some time. It was destined for failure ultimately, because at some point when you use FBI resources, the FBI is going to catch on. He used SEC resources, the SEC is going to catch on. So to some extent it was doomed by failure, but 9/11 certainly accelerated that process.
It just goes to show that the FBI is just not going to tolerate that kind of behavior within its ranks. It was an extraordinary investigation, and the amount of resources and the personal and professional dedication of all the agents involved. It was really a shining example of how a law enforcement agency addresses a problem from within.
It's Elgindy's insatiable desire for more that leads to his own undoing.
Elgindy used his intelligence in the wrong way. I think he could have been a very productive person, a very accomplished trader, if he had his values where they should be. If you're out there doing wrong, there's going to be some event that's triggered that's going to have the FBI looking into you. For whatever reason, the way this world works, that seems to catch up with you almost every time. That greed will catch up with you.
Side of the box is the help me signals of the unsuspecting. The process was a well-oiled machine fueled by high-grade methamphetamine. The theft: scour the residential neighborhoods in the dead of night, grab the mail, take the purses from unlocked cars. The production: Tammy and the tech team would use the stolen data to print fake IDs and matching checks that would pass a cursory glance. The hit: the mules would hit the banks right when they opened at 9:00 a.m., before the victims even realized their mail was missing. The split: Michael took 50% off the top. The rest went straight into the addict's veins or into the pockets of the next dealer. Michael felt invincible. He had 40 people working for him, a network of ghosts haunting the Denver metro area. He was raking in hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was the top dog. But greed has a way of blurring the lines of caution, and the very met that gave him his edge was beginning to feed a growing, gnawing paranoia. He started seeing feds in every passing sedan, and wires in every light fixture. Chapter 3, The Hunter and the Prey. Detective Jim Rock stared at the bulletin board in the Denver Police Department. It was a chaotic spider web of red string, connecting names, bank logos, and grainy surveillance photos. In the center of it all was a face he was becoming intimately familiar with. Virginia Dissett, he muttered, looking at a photo of a woman in a blonde wig and oversized sunglasses. Third time this week she's cashed a check at a different branch. Only problem is, the real Virginia is currently crying in a holding cell. Rock had spoken to the real Virginia. He had seen the way her hands shook, not from withdrawal, but from pure, unadulterated terror. He knew she was innocent the moment he heard the tremble in her voice. She wasn't a criminal. She was a casualty of a war she didn't even know was being fought. "We've got a link," his partner said, dropping a heavy folder on the desk. A woman named Roberta Corcoran was picked up in the next county over. She tried to use a stolen credit card at a department store. When they searched her bag, they found 3 different IDs, including one for Virginia Dissett. And she's a canary, Jim. She's singing. She mentioned a name, Shrekingist. Rock leaned back, the springs of his chair groaning. "The guy with the cameras in the trees. I've been out there. He's smart. He's got the whole neighborhood wired. He knows when a squirrel crosses his lawn." "Not smart enough," the partner replied. One of the clerks at a grocery store got wise. They noticed the ID didn't match the signature on the back of the check. They stalled her. "Call us. The whole house of cards is starting to wobble." Rock decided to play a game of psychological warfare. He didn't have enough for a search warrant, yet Michael was careful about keeping the physical evidence moving, but he had enough to be a nuisance. Over the next month, Rock became the ghost in Michael Shrekingist's machine. He would drive by the fortress at 2:00 a.m. He would park his unmarked sedan at the end of the block and just stare at the cameras, letting the red IR lights reflect in his eyes. He would knock on the door at dinner time, wait for the heavy silence, and then slowly slip his business card through the crack. He wanted Michael to know he was coming. He wanted the kingpin to twitch. He wanted the paranoia to do the work for him. And Michael did twitch. On July 31st, 2002, the kingpin made a rookie mistake that no professional should ever make. Maybe the lack of sleep had finally caught up to him, or maybe he was just tired of the pressure of being watched. He walked into a bank himself, trying to use an ID that was already flagged, Benjamin Bryce Taiwan Kim. The ID was poor, a rushed job by a distracted Tammy, and the check was a duplicate of one used the day before. When the police cruiser swarmed the parking lot, Michael didn't run, he didn't fight. He just sat in his car, the weight of a 10-year prison sentence finally settling on his shoulders like a lead shroud. The Harley case was over, but the fallout was a radioactive cloud that would linger for years. Chapter 4, The Cost of the High. For Tammy Carroll, the end didn't come with the flash of a police siren or a raid on her apartment. It came with the cold, rhythmic thud of a gavel in a courtroom filled with the sterile, uncaring light of justice. Tammy was trembling as she stood before the bench. Her skin was a pale, sickly gray, her hair lank, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had survived the raids. She had survived the high-speed chases. She had even survived the brutal come-downs in a concrete cell. But she couldn't survive the truth. You are a drug addict, the judge said, his voice as sharp as a razor and devoid of any scrap of pity. And as long as you are a danger to the very lives you brought into this world. This court finds you unfit. I am terminating your parental rights for the youngest child immediately. The others will remain in foster care indefinitely. Tammy felt like she had been shot in the chest. The money, the printed checks, the $4,000 weeks, the thrill of the scam, it was all gone, evaporated like smoke in the wind. All that was left was a hollow, echoing ache in her chest where her children used to be. I decided to change my life that day, Tammy would later tell her support group, her voice thick with unshed tears. No drug, no check, no fraud. Nothing in the world was worth losing my babies. While Tammy began the long, agonizing road to sobriety, a path paved with withdrawal, shame, and the slow rebuilding of a shattered soul, the victims were still picking up the pieces of their own lives. Virginia Dissette sat at her kitchen table, lit by a single lamp, surrounded by mountains of credit reports and legal notices. Her name had been cleared of the criminal charges, but the rest remained on her record like a permanent stain on a white shirt. When the charges are dropped, it's for lack of evidence. The clerk at the record's office had told her, not even looking up. It doesn't mean you're innocent. It just means we can't prove you did it. Virginia looked at her reflection in the dark window. She saw a woman who had been violated by strangers in the night, then interrogated and shamed by the very state that was supposed to protect her. The identity thieves hadn't just stolen her money, they had stolen her peace of mind. Every time she handed over her ID at a store, every time she saw a police car in her rearview mirror, the cold dread returned. She was a ghost in her own life. Chapter 5. The Phantom of Wheaton. While Denver was drowning in the meth-fueled chaos of the Schreckingest ring, a different kind of shadow was haunting the affluent suburbs of Chicago. Wheaton, Illinois, was the kind of place where people didn't bother to lock their back doors. It was apple pie America's stately homes, manicured lawns, and the quiet hum of prosperity. But in 2002, a darkness fell over the city that no amount of street lights could dispel. He was tall, lean, and terrifyingly precise. He didn't use drugs. He didn't leave a paper trail. He didn't need a wig or a stolen ID. He only needed a balaclava and a plan. The Wheaton Bandit was a professional in a world of amateurs. On a biting February morning, the bandit crouched in the thick winter bushes outside a small branch bank. He checked his watch. 6:30 a.m. The air was so cold it burned his lungs, but he didn't move. He watched the tellers arrive, noting the exact second they stepped out of their cars. He knew their routine. He knew which one carried the primary keys. He knew the lag time on the vault's time lock. As the head teller, a woman named Jennifer, turned the key in the lock, the bandit moved. He didn't run, he glided. He was a blur of dark, tactical clothing and cold intent. Inside, now, do not look back, he commanded. His voice wasn't a panicked scream. It was a steady, terrifying calm that froze the blood. He pointed a handgun of black semi-automatic at Jennifer's chest. But even in her terror, she noticed something strange. He didn't have his finger on the trigger. He indexed it, keeping it straight along the slide of the gun. It was the mark of a man trained in the art of violence, a soldier, a high-level security guard, or perhaps a brother in blue. Inside the bank, he moved with the tactical grace of a predator. Opened the vault, hand over the drawers. No die packs. Jennifer, I know what they look like. I know how they work. I used to work in a bank just like you. The teller was frozen. She looked into his eyes, the only part of him visible through the dark tactical hood. They were a striking, piercing, icy blue. They didn't look like the eyes of a monster. They looked like the eyes of a neighbor, a father, a man you might pass in the grocery store. I have a police scanner, he told them, the device crackling softly in his pocket. If you call, I'll know before the sirens start. 5 minutes on the floor. Don't move, and you live. He vanished into the swirling snow before the first alarm could even be triggered. Detective Steve Hamill arrived on the scene 40 minutes later, his breath hitching in the cold. He looked at the perfect footprints in the fresh snow. They led with military precision to a one-way street where a car had clearly been idling in the shadows. He's alone, Hamill noted, kneeling to measure the tread. No getaway driver, no partner to run his mouth. Just one man, a lot of training, and a heart of ice. The FBI joined the hunt shortly after. Agents Tina Forkas and Eric Cayley began building a profile that sent shivers through the department. He wears professional-grade body armor under his coat. He uses a high-end balaclava, the kind used by SWAT operators. He indexes his weapon, showing advanced firearms training. He strikes during blizzards or heavy rain to defeat surveillance cameras. He knows the internal policies of banks better than the managers do. He's not doing this for the money. Cayley suggested during a late-night briefing, the room smelling of stale coffee and desperation. Look at the takes. $14,000 here. $17,000 there for the insane risk he's taking. It's not enough to build a life on. He's doing it for the rush, the adrenaline. He's taunting us. He's playing a game. And so far, he's winning. The Wheaton Bandit hit 16 times over the next 5 years. He became a ghost story for the Chicago suburbs of Phantom that the police couldn't touch, even as he walked among them. Chapter 6, The Mortgage Nightmare. While the Wheaton Bandit was a ghost of violence. Other thieves were ghosts of paper and ink. Anita Jans was a woman who believed in the American dream. She worked hard, saved her money, and took pride in her credit score. In September 2005, she decided to shop around for a better mortgage rate on her family home. She called a broker, expecting a routine conversation about interest points and closing costs. I see you already have several mortgages out, Ms. Jans, the broker said casually. Quite a portfolio you're building. Anita froze, the phone feeling like an ice cube against her ear. I'm sorry. I have one mortgage. On this house, that's it. Actually, the broker continued, clicking his mouse, according to your report. You've purchased nearly $1 million in property over the last 6 months. 3 different homes in the suburbs, all in your name, all with your social security number. The world seemed to dissolve around her. Anita wasn't just a victim of a stolen wallet. She was the victim of a total life hijack. Someone had used a file-sharing program called LimeWire to crawl through her unsecured home computer, pulling every digital scrap of her identity, her tax returns, her birth certificate, her bank logins. You're in panic. Anita would later recall. You're scared. You think, am I responsible for $1 million in debt? She spent 600 hours, the equivalent of 15 full work weeks, trying to scrub the filth of the theft from her name. She called title companies, mortgage lenders, and police departments only to be met with bureaucracy and suspicion. It wasn't until she hired ID Watchdog, a professional rehab firm, that the nightmare began to fade. But the person who stole her life, Kimberly Merritt, was already looking for her next fix. Chapter 7, The Infiltrator. Not all identity thieves are criminals. Some are hired to show you just how easy it is to lose everything. Jim Stickley, a security expert for Trace Security, sat in his car outside a high-rise bank headquarters. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was wearing a fire inspector's uniform, complete with a fake badge that looked official enough to pass a 5-second glance. Watch this, he told the hidden camera in his button. He walked into the lobby, carrying a heavy black bag and a clipboard. He looked bored, professional, and entirely invisible. Fire inspection, he told the receptionist with a tired sigh. Need to check the server rooms and the backup tapes. Regulations, you know how it is. Of course, she said, buzzing him through the secure glass doors. Do you need an escort? Nah, I've got the map. Just need the keys to the data center. She handed them over without asking for a second ID. 10 minutes later, Stickley was in the heart of the bank's digital brain. He opened his bag and began loading in the backup tapes containing the social security numbers, addresses, and account balances of every single customer the bank served. Thousands of lives packed into a black nylon bag. He walked out the front door, waved to the security guard, and drove away. 2 days later, he returned in street clothes to meet with the bank's executive board. He dumped the tapes onto the mahogany conference table. The room went silent. The CEO looked like he was about to vomit. "I'm not silver-tongued," Stickley said, leaning back. "I'm just a nice, average guy. And that's all it takes. You don't need a hacker in a basement. You just need a guy in a uniform and a smile." The message was clear. Your identity is only as safe as the weakest link in the chain. And in America, the chain was made of paper-thin trust. Chapter 8. The Digital Ghosts of the Plains. The war shifted again. Agents Kirsten Gregg and Danya Davis of the CBI fraud unit were the new generation of hunters. They didn't chase people through alleys. They chased data through the ether. "Kimberly Merritt is our top priority," Kirsten said, her eyes fixed on a map of the Colorado plains. "She's not just a thief. She's a predator. She's using LimeWire to haunt people's home networks while they sleep. She's scammed $140,000, and she's spending it all on high-grade meth." They tracked Kim to a desolate, rusted RV parked on a windswept patch of land 25 miles outside Denver. The trailer was a tomb of stolen lives. Inside, the agents found Kimberly surrounded by a mountain of credit documents, loan applications, and glossy brochures for luxury vehicles she had purchased using other women's names. Next to a stack of forged Social Security cards sat a glass crack pipe, still warm, and a small baggie of white crystals. "Is this a legit account?" Danya asked, holding up a document for a predatory loan. "Because you know I'm going to check it, Kim. I'm going to call every name on this list." Kim looked at the agents, her skin sallow, her eyes darting like trapped birds. "It's the drugs," she whispered, her voice cracking. "The drugs make me do it. I start looking at the papers and the temptation. It's all consuming. I'm not Kim anymore. I'm whoever is on the paper." As the handcuffs clicked into place, the cycle was complete. Another addict, another set of victims like Anita Jans, another trail of ruined credit that would take years to repair. Chapter 9. The Final Taunt. By late 2006, the Wheaton Bandit was feeling the heat. A task force had been formed. The reward had climbed to $50,000. Tips were pouring in. On November 29th, he hit his 14th bank. But this time, someone was watching. A witness in a car thought the bandit was his brother and called out to him. The bandit froze, startled. He gave a quick, "Sorry" wave and hurried away. That wave, that split second of humanity, allowed the witness to describe his face. A sketch was released: a man with piercing blue eyes and a sharp, determined jaw. On December 11th, 2006, the sketch hit the news. And then the Wheaton Bandit did the one thing the police didn't expect. He vanished. No more robberies. No more tactical entries. No more indexing the weapon. Is it a swan song? Detective Hamill wondered, staring at the sketch. Or is he just waiting for the snow to hide him again? Epilogue. The remnants of theft. Tammy Carroll is clean today. She works at a drug treatment center, a beacon of hope for those lost in the road to sobriety. Her 3 oldest children are finally back in her care. She makes in a month what she used to make in a day. But when she looks at her kids, she knows she is finally the real Tammy. Virginia Dissette is still fighting the ghosts of 2002. Her arrest record is a shadow that follows her to every job interview. She is a living reminder that in the war on identity theft, the guilty go to prison, but the innocent never truly get their lives back. And in the quiet, affluent streets of Wheaton, Illinois, the banks are now guarded by greeters and no hats, no sunglasses signs. But every now and then, when the wind howls through the trees and a man with blue eyes walks into a lobby, the tellers hold their breath and look at his hands. Is he indexing the weapon? The end. The ghost of identity. A tale of greed and shadows. Prologue. The stolen breath. The blue lights of the cruiser didn't just illuminate the dashboard of Virginia Dissette's car. They seemed to slice through the very fabric of her reality. It was a Saturday afternoon in Denver, a day for errands, for the mundane comfort of a suburban life, for the chiropractic appointment she had just finished. But as the officer approached her window, the air inside her sedan grew heavy, thick with a premonition of disaster. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice steady, the voice of a mother who followed every rule. "Ma'am, please step out of the vehicle," the officer replied, his hand resting near his holster. "There's a warrant out for your arrest, felony forgery." In that moment, Virginia felt her name, her reputation, and her very identity dissolve. Somewhere in the city, someone was wearing her face, spending her money, and leaving a trail of wreckage that now led directly to her. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a haunting. Chapter 1, The Blue-Eyed Phantom. 500 miles away, in the manicured silence of Wheaton, Illinois, another kind of ghost was haunting the dawn. The man in the bushes did not feel the bite of the morning frost. He didn't feel the adrenaline of a common criminal, either. He felt the cold, clinical precision of a professional. He adjusted the balaclava the tactical hood favored by SWAT teams and checked the slide of his weapon. He didn't keep his finger on the trigger. He kept it indexed along the frame, just as he had been trained. He watched the tellers arrive. They were young, laughing, unaware that their world was about to be shattered by a man with striking blue eyes. Inside the Wheaton Bank, Jennifer, the supervisor, felt a shiver. It wasn't the air conditioning. It was a sound the snap of a twig near the drive-up ATM. She looked toward the glass doors and saw a shape rising from the shadows. "Hurry!" she shouted to the teller behind her. As the phantom lunged for the handle, the lock clicked. The glass door held. Through the transparency of the barrier, Jennifer locked eyes with the monster. Those blue eyes didn't show anger, they showed a chilling calculation. Then, as quickly as he had appeared, the Wheaton bandit vanished into the trees, leaving behind only the scent of fear and a set of footprints in the snow. Chapter 2. The Methamphetamine Mirage. In a cluttered RV on the desolate plains outside Denver, Tammy Carroll lived in a different kind of haze. For her, time was measured in points, the small bags of crystal methamphetamine that turned days into a singular, frantic blur. The RV smelled of stale cigarettes, burnt chemicals, and the ink of a high-end laser jet printer. "We got a new one, Tammy," Michael Schreckingus said, tossing a stolen wallet onto the table. "Virginia Dissette, clean record, high credit limit. She's your twin for the week." Tammy picked up the driver's license. She looked at the woman's face, a woman who looked like she probably baked cookies and never missed a PTA meeting. Tammy ran a hand through her own tangled hair. She had the wigs ready. She had the sunglasses. "How much?" Tammy whispered, her eyes wide and dilated. "Enough for a pound of glass and that Harley I've been eyeing." Michael grinned. He was the architect. He was the one who understood that in the 21st century, you didn't need to break into a house to steal a life. You just needed a social security number and a mailbox with the red flag up. Tammy went to work. The meth allowed her to focus for 20, 30 hours straight. She wasn't just printing checks. She was crafting a persona. She learned Virginia's address, her bank account number from a stolen statement, the names of her children. "I'm becoming her," Tammy muttered to herself, the printer whirring like a heartbeat in the cramped space. "I'm living her life, and she doesn't even know I'm here." Chapter 3. The Weight of the Orange Jumpsuit. The Jefferson County Jail was a place where color went to die. For Virginia Dissette, the orange jumpsuit was a brand of shame. She sat on the edge of the metal cot, listening to the rhythmic clanging of doors and the distant, muffled cries of women who had long ago given up on innocence. She thought about her husband, frantically trying to scrape together $10,000 for bail. She thought about her children, who were being told their mother was a criminal. "You don't belong here, do you, honey?" an older inmate asked, her voice raspy from years of cigarettes. "I didn't do anything," Virginia whispered. "None of us did, according to the paperwork," the woman cackled. "But the system don't care about the truth. It cares about the name on the warrant." Virginia realized then that she was being victimized twice. Once by the thief who had snatched her wallet, and once by a justice system that was too blind to see the difference between a predator and the prey. Detective Jim Rock, the man who had signed that warrant, was at that moment staring at a surveillance photo. It showed a woman at a bank teller window. She wore Virginia's hair, Virginia's glasses, and was cashing a check for $900. "It looks like her," Rock muttered to his partner. "But the eyes are wrong. There's a desperation in these eyes that Virginia Dissette doesn't have." He began to pull the thread. One check led to Roberta Corcoran. Corcoran led to a web of meth houses. And at the center of the web sat Michael Schreckingus. Chapter 4. The Harley Heist. Michael Schreckingus didn't see himself as a drug dealer or a common thief. He saw himself as an entrepreneur of the underground. He had a fleet of 40 addicts working for him, his soldiers. They brought him the trash, the mail, the wallets, the discarded bank statements, and he turned that trash into gold. The pinnacle of his career was the Harley Davidson. He had found a convenience check in a stolen mail pile. It belonged to a woman with a $25,000 credit limit who hadn't even checked her mail that day. Michael didn't just cash it. He went to the dealership. He wore a suit. He spoke with the confidence of a man who owned the world. Beautiful bike, he told the salesman, gesturing to the gleaming chrome of a $17,000 Harley. It's a classic. Sir, how would you like to handle the financing? I'll just write a check, Michael said, flashing the stolen ID. He rode out of that dealership with the wind in his face, feeling invincible. He had cameras in his trees at home, cameras on his roof, a fortress of paranoia fueled by the very drug he sold. He knew the police were coming. He could see Detective Rod banging on his door through his monitors. But Michael just laughed. He had 40 different names. He could disappear into any one of them. Chapter 5. Trace Security, the Ethical Thief. While Michael Schreckingist was using identities to destroy lives, Jim Stickley was using them to save them. Dressed in a generic uniform with a fake fire inspector badge, Stickley walked into the lobby of a major Denver bank. He carried a black bag and a look of mild annoyance, the universal language of a man doing his job. Fire inspection, he told the receptionist. I need to check the data center for wiring compliance. Oh, of course, right this way, she said, handing him the keys to the kingdom. Within 10 minutes, Stickley was in the server room. He wasn't looking for fire hazards. He was looking for backup tapes. He slid them into his bag, every customer's social security number, every mother's maiden name, every cent they owned. He walked out the front door, tipped his hat to the security guard, and drove to his office. 2 days later, he returned the tapes to the bank's board of directors. You let a stranger walk out with your entire legacy, Stickley told them, watching their faces turn pale. The criminals aren't just the ones in the bushes with guns. They're the ones you invite in with a smile. Chapter 6. The Fall of the House of Cards. The end for Michael Schreckingist didn't come with a grand shootout. It came because of a single moment of laziness. On July 31st, 2002, the Kingpin decided to do the work himself. He was high, his judgment clouded by the very meth that had once given him an edge. He walked into a bank using a crudely forged ID under the name Benjamin Bryce Taiwan Kim. It was a name he had used before. The teller, alerted by a previous fraud report, hit the silent alarm. When the police arrived, Michael didn't run. He sat there, surrounded by his own lies, the blue lights finally catching up to him. Tammy Carroll was arrested shortly after. She was found in the RV, surrounded by the debris of 100 stolen lives. But for Tammy, the handcuffs weren't the worst part. You're a drug addict, the judge told her during sentencing. and I don't ever want to see your children in your care again." The silence that followed was louder than any siren. Tammy looked at her youngest child, who was being led away for adoption. In that moment, the greed that had fueled her addiction vanished, replaced by a cold, crushing reality. She had traded her family for a chemical mirage and a printer. Chapter 7, The Long Road Back. Virginia Dissett was eventually cleared. The charges were dropped for lack of evidence, but there was no apology, no letter of innocence. Her arrest record remained like a scar on a digital landscape. When she applied for a loan or a job, that felony forgery arrest popped up, a ghost she couldn't exorcise. "It's not over," she told her husband. "They stole my name, and the system is keeping it." Meanwhile, Anita Jans discovered that someone had used her name to buy nearly $1 million in properties. She spent 600 hours on the phone, a prisoner of her own credit report. In the shadows, the Wheaton Bandit continued his work. He hit a credit union in Winfield. He hit a bank in Geneva. He was in and out in 60 seconds. He was the ultimate professional, a man who indexed his weapon and wore body armor. He was the dark reflection of the digital thieves, a man who still believed in the power of a gun and a mask. Chapter 8, Redemption and Remnants. Years later, Tammy Carroll stood in a community center, her eyes clear for the first time in a decade. She was clean. Her 3 oldest children had been returned to her. "I make in a month what I used to make in a day," she told the group of recovering addicts. "But I can look in the mirror now. I know whose face I'm looking at." But for the victims like Virginia and Anita, the war on identity theft was just beginning. Behind every stolen check was a meth pipe. Behind every bank robbery was a man with blue eyes who knew how to hide in the bushes. And somewhere in the suburbs of Chicago, the Wheaton Bandit was looking at a new sketch of his face. He didn't panic. He just adjusted his tactical hood, checked his scanner, and waited for the next morning's light. Because in the world of American greed, the greatest commodity isn't gold. It's the truth of who you are and how easily that truth can be rewritten by a stranger in the dark. Chapter 9, The LimeWire Lurker. The hunt for shadows continued, but the shadows were evolving. Agents Kirsten Gregg and Danya Davis of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation found themselves driving through the desolate plains, 25 miles outside Denver. Their target wasn't a bank robber with a gun, but a woman with a keyboard and a meth pipe. Kimberly Merritt was a new breed of predator. She didn't need to steal wallets. She used LimeWire. She sat in a cramped RV, searching the peer-to-peer network for unsecured computers. She wasn't looking for music. She was looking for tax returns, mortgage applications, and scanned bank statements. It's too easy. Merritt had once bragged to an associate, "People share their whole lives and don't even know the door is open." When the agents arrived at the RV, the smell of chemical decay hit them like a wall. Inside, surrounded by credit documents and piles of stolen mail, Merritt sat with her addiction right next to her a small plastic baggie of crystal meth and a glass pipe. "Is this a legit account?" Agent Davis asked, holding up a fresh credit card application. "Because you know I'm going to check it." Merritt's eyes darted to the drug paraphernalia. The temptation to lie was there, but the evidence was overwhelming. She had scammed over $140,000 using the identities of 4 women. One of them was Anita Jans, whose credit score had been decimated by a phantom $1 million mortgage. As the handcuffs clicked around Merritt's wrists, she whispered, "It's the drugs. They make me do it. I just need to stay high." Chapter 10, The Wheaton Task Force. In Illinois, the Wheaton Bandit had become more than a criminal. He was a legend, a specter that the local police and the FBI couldn't pin down. Special agents Tina Forkas and Eric Cayley stood in the wooded cul-de-sac behind a bank that had been hit for the 3rd time. They were looking at footprints in the snow footprints that led with military precision to a one-way street where a getaway car had likely been waiting. "He's indexing his weapon," Cayley noted, reviewing the latest grainy surveillance footage. "Look at the finger. Along the slide. He's trained. He's not a jittery addict. He's a professional." The hypothesis was chilling. Was the Wheaton Bandit one of their own? A former cop? A SWAT operator? The way he moved, the tactical hood he wore, the suspected body armor under his coat had all pointed to someone who knew exactly how law enforcement responded to a Code 30 bank robbery. The reward jumped to $50,000. Tips poured in over 100 names. People looked at their neighbors, their co-workers, even their brothers. A sketch was released based on a witness who thought he'd seen the man without his mask near a stop sign. But as the sketch went public, the robbery stopped. The bandit had gone to ground. The suburban silence returned to Wheaton, but it was a heavy silence, pregnant with the fear that he was simply waiting for the reward posters to fade. Chapter 11, The Sacred Oath Broken. While the street-level thieves and bank robbers fought for thousands, a far more sophisticated greed was festering in the medical clinics of Chicago. Dr. Martinez was a man of prestige. He had the white coat, the wall of diplomas, and the trust of the community. Patients came to him in pain, looking for healing. But Martinez saw them as entries in a ledger-walking insurance policies. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its scale. Martinez began billing insurance companies for surgeries that never happened. He manipulated medical records, creating phantom procedures for real patients. "I'm just optimizing the system," he told himself as he looked at his growing bank balance. But Joyce Brandon, a dedicated administrator with an eye for detail, noticed the discrepancies. She saw the ghost surgeries. She saw the $1 million billings for a clinic that didn't have the staff to perform them. When she confronted the doctor, the prestige vanished. Behind the stethoscope was a man, who had traded his Hippocratic oath for a life of luxury, and he wasn't about to let an administrator bring it all down. Chapter 12. The Price of Silence. Chicago's winter wind whistled through the high-rise windows as Dr. Martinez paced his office. The federal investigators were starting to ask questions. The ghost billings were being flagged. And then there was Joyce. In the world of American greed, the transition from financial fraud to violent crime is often a single, desperate step. Martinez wasn't a meth addict like Tammy or a bank robber like the Wheaton Bandit. He was a man of status, and the thought of losing it was a poison more potent than any drug. Nobody has a motive to kill Joyce Brandon, the lead investigator would later say, except for a man like Martinez. The plan was hatched in the dark. $1 million insurance scheme was about to become a murder investigation. As Martinez looked at the surgical tools on his tray, he realized that the same hands that were supposed to save lives were now prepared to take one to protect his lifestyle. The war on identity and greed had moved from the RVs of Denver and the banks of Wheaton to the sterile, cold halls of a Chicago hospital. And this time, the cost wasn't just credit scores or cash, it was a human life. To be continued. The Paper Masks, A Tale of Greed and Shadows. Prologue, The Blue Lights of Denver. The sky over Denver was a bruised purple, the kind of twilight that promised a cold night. Virginia Dissette adjusted the rearview mirror of her sedan, her mind drifting to the mundane list of Saturday chores. She just finished a chiropractic appointment, a small relief for a nagging back pain, and was looking forward to a quiet evening with her husband. Then the blue lights flickered in her mirror. She pulled over, a slight frown of annoyance on her face. Speeding. Maybe a few miles over, she thought. She reached for her registration, already rehearsing a polite apology. The officer who approached wasn't smiling. His hand rested near his holster. License and registration. Ma'am. Virginia handed them over. Was I going too fast, officer? Sit tight, Mrs. Dissette. Minutes stretched. Virginia watched the dust motes dancing in her headlights. When the officer returned, he wasn't alone. Another patrol car had pulled up behind them. Ma'am, I need you to step out of the vehicle, the officer said, his voice flat. I don't understand. Is there a problem? There is a warrant out for your arrest. Virginia. Felony forgery. Virginia felt the world tilt. The air in her lungs seemed to turn to glass. Forgery? No, you're joking. I'm a mother. I've never even had a parking ticket until today. Hands on the car, ma'am. The cold bite of the handcuffs was the first reality. The second was the smell of the county jail bleach, stale sweat, and despair. As she sat in the holding cell, wearing a thin jumpsuit that scratched her skin, she thought of her wallet. It had been stolen 2 months ago. She had reported it, canceled the cards, and moved on. She didn't know then that her name had been harvested. She didn't know that miles away, in a house smelling of chemical rot and frantic energy, a woman with trembling hands was currently becoming Virginia Dissette. Chapter 1, The Kitchen Alchemist. Tammy Carroll hadn't slept in 3 days. The world was sharp, vibrating at a frequency only she could hear. In the flickering light of a single bulb in her kitchen, she looked like a ghost. Her skin was pale, her eyes sunken, but her mind fueled by the bitter crystalline fire of methamphetamine was racing. On the table before her lay the spoils of a mail run. Red flags, Tammy whispered to herself. In the suburbs, a red flag up on a mailbox was a beacon. It meant a bill was inside. It meant a check was waiting to be plucked. It was easier than hunting. It was like picking fruit from a low-hanging branch. Beside the stolen mail sat a laptop and a high-end printer. Tammy was a master of the convenience check. She didn't need a real checkbook anymore. She just needed a routing number, an account number from a discarded bank statement, and a name. Tonight, she was working on a new identity. She picked up a stolen driver's license. The woman in the photo looked nothing like her fairer hair, wider eyes. Wigs, Tammy muttered, scratching at a phantom itch on her arm. We need more wigs. The door creaked open. Michael Schreckingist walked in. He was the top dog, the architect of this loose-knit empire of addicts. He carried himself with a terrifying, jittery authority. How many did you print? Michael asked, his eyes darting to the windows. He had cameras in the trees outside his house, cameras on the roof. He was a man living in a fortress of his own paranoia. For, Tammy said, holding up the fresh sheets, $900 each. Any more and the tellers get suspicious. Good, Michael said, grabbing a check. He looked at it with a predatory grin. I'm going for the big one tomorrow. A Harley. A real American machine for a real American fraud. Tammy watched him. She didn't care about Harleys. She cared about the baggie in Michael's pocket. The greed wasn't about the money. It was about the duration of the high. Identity theft was the perfect crime for a method dictate required hours of meticulous, obsessive focus. You could spend 18 hours perfecting the font on a counterfeit check, and the drug would make you feel like a god of detail. What about the woman? Tammy asked, pointing to the ID. The one whose life we're using. Michael laughed, a dry, rasping sound. She's just a ghost now. Tammy, we're the ones living her life. We're the ones spending her credit. Outside, the wind howled across the Colorado plains. In a jail cell miles away, the real Virginia Dissette wept. In this kitchen, the fake one began to print another sheet of lies. Chapter 2, The Shadow over Wheaton. While the meth-fueled forgers ran their paper scams in Denver, a different kind of predator haunted the quiet, apple pie streets of Wheaton, Illinois. He was known as the Wheaton Bandit. He was a ghost of a different sort. He didn't want your mail or your social security number. He wanted the raw adrenaline of a vault being opened. He wanted the weight of a loaded handgun in his palm. It was 6:00 a.m. A light frost covered the bushes outside the bank. The bandit waited, his breath hitching in his throat. He wasn't a desperate addict. He was professional. He was disciplined. He adjusted his balaclava tactical hood favored by SWAT teams. Underneath, he wore body armor. He wasn't just a robber. He was a soldier in a war only he was fighting. Two employees approached the door, their keys jingling in the morning silence. They were talking about coffee, about their weekend plans. The bandit stepped out of the shadows. "Don't move," he commanded. His voice was calm, which made it more terrifying. He didn't scream. He didn't shake. He indexed his weapon, keeping his trigger finger along the slide of the gun, just like a trained officer would. Inside, now, John England, a teller who had worked at the bank for 17 years, felt her hard hammer against her ribs. She looked at the man, or rather, she tried not to, but she caught his eyes. Striking, piercing blue eyes. They were the only part of him that felt human. "Unlock the vault," he said, ushering them into the lobby. "I know how this works. I used to work in a bank. Don't try the die packs." Jean fumbled with the keys. "Please, I have a family." "Then do as you're told," the bandit replied. He was in control. He moved with a practiced grace, grabbing the cash drawers himself, forcing the tellers to the floor. He wasn't just stealing money, he was stealing the peace of a whole town. When he left, disappearing through a wood line into a quiet cul-de-sac, he didn't run like a coward. He walked with the steady pace of a man who knew exactly where the police would be coming from. He had a scanner. He heard their sirens before they even turned the corner. In the silence of the bank, Jonna England stayed on the floor, counting the seconds. She didn't know that this man would strike 16 times. She didn't know that he was the shadow that would hang over Wheaton for 5 long years. Chapter 3, The Hunters. Detective Jim Rock of the Denver Police Department stared at the board in his office. It was a spider web of names, photos, and bank statements. "It's a ring," Rock said, pointing to a photo of Roberta Corcoran. "She was caught using Virginia Desette's ID, but she's just a foot soldier. Look at the checks. The quality is too high for a street-level user." His partner, Joe Morales from the DAS office, nodded. "It's the meth, Jim. 80% of our identity theft cases have a glass pipe at the end of the trail. They stay up for a week straight, printing these things. They're like a hive mind. We need the top," Rock said. "We need the guy who's providing the software, the one who's making the IDs." Their investigation led them into the dark heart of the Denver metro area. They talked to informants, tracked the purchase of high-end printers, and monitored the mail diving hotspots. Finally, a name surfaced: Michael Schreckingist. He's paranoid. Rock warned his team. He's got cameras everywhere. He's turned his house into a bunker. If we go in hot, he'll burn everything before we reach the door. Rock decided on a different tactic. He began to haunt Schreckingist. He would drive by the house, bang on the door, and wave at the cameras. "I want him to know I'm there," Rock explained. "I want to add to the fire of his paranoia. I want him to make a mistake. And Schreckingus did. Paranoia and meth are a volatile mix. On July 31st, 2002, Michael decided he needed a quick win. He walked into a bank using a poorly made ID. The name on the card was Benjamin Bryce Taiwan Kim. It was a clumsy, desperate alias, a sign that his mind was finally fraying. The teller, already alerted to the spree, recognized the check. She didn't panic. She hit the silent alarm. When the police arrived, Schreckingus didn't run. He sat in the lobby, the counterfeit ID in his hand, looking at the door with a strange expression of relief. The game was over, but for the victims, the nightmare was just beginning. Chapter 4, The Void of the Cell. Virginia Dissett huddled on the cold, metal bench of the holding cell. The lights never went out. They were a hum in the ceiling, a constant, buzzing reminder that she was no longer a person, she was a number. Hey, new girl, a voice croaked from the corner. Virginia didn't look up. She kept her eyes fixed on the peeling paint of the floor. She thought of her husband, frantic, trying to scrape together $10,000 for bail. She thought of her children, wondering where Mom was. I didn't do it, Virginia whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The other woman laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Nobody did it here, honey. We're all just victims of a big misunderstanding. Virginia felt a surge of anger. No, I mean it. Someone stole my life. They stole my wallet, and now they're using my name. The silence that followed was heavy. The woman in the corner sat up. Identity theft. That's the big one these days. They call it paper tripping. You're just a ghost left behind. Virginia spent hours watching the guards haul off people in orange jumpsuits. She felt a profound sense of violation. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that the system, the police, the tellers, the state looked at a criminal wearing a wig and saw her. When her husband finally arrived with the bail money late that night, Virginia walked out into the cool Denver air, but she didn't feel free. She felt like a transparent version of herself. I've been victimized twice, she told her husband as they drove home. Once by the thief, and once by the people who were supposed to protect me. Chapter 5, The Chrome Temptation. Michael Schreckingus stood in the showroom of the Harley-Davidson dealership. The smell of new leather and polished chrome was intoxicating. He felt like a king. He wasn't just a meth addict living in a house with cameras. He was a man about to ride away on $17,000 of pure American steel. He handed the salesman a convenience check. Credit limits $25,000, Michael said, his voice steady despite the vibration in his nerves. This should cover the bike and the gear. The salesman looked at the check. It was a stolen document, plucked from a woman's mailbox before she even knew it existed. But Michael had worked on it for 12 hours. He'd matched the fonts, adjusted the alignment, and ensured the ink looked fresh. Let me just run this through, Mr. Bryce, the salesman said. Michael waited. Every second was a lifetime. He imagined the cameras in the trees at his house. He imagined Detective Rock's face. He felt the high peaking, making the lights in the showroom seem like explosions. Everything looks good. The salesman returned, smiling. She's yours. Michael rode that Harley for 3 weeks. He felt untouchable. He was using a stolen identity to buy a dream. But greed is a bottomless pit. The more he stole, the more meth he needed. The more meth he used, the more he believed he was a ghost that could never be caught. He didn't know that Detective Rock was already tracing the purchase. He didn't know that the chrome he loved so much was actually a beacon, leading the hunter straight to his door. Chapter 6: Digital Shadows. In a sterile office at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, Agent Danya Davis stared at a scrolling list of LimeWire logs. Kimberly Merritt isn't diving into dumpsters, Danya said, pointing to a highlighted IP address. She's fishing. LimeWire? Agent Kirsten Gregg asked, leaning over her shoulder. She searches for tax_return.pdf or bank_statement.xls on unsecured networks. People share their music folders and don't realize their whole hard drive is open to the world. She downloads their lives while they're sleeping. The scale was staggering. Kimberly Merritt had scammed nearly $1 million in properties using the names of 4 women. Anita Jans was one of them. Anita didn't know anything was wrong until she tried to refinance her mortgage. I see you have more than one mortgage, the broker had told her. What? No, I don't. Well, according to this, you own 3 other properties, and you're 6 months behind on all of them. The agents tracked Merritt to an RV on the edge of the plains. It was a stark contrast to the digital sophistication of her crimes. Inside, the RV was a disaster of addiction. It's the drugs. Merritt cried when they found her. I memorized their social security numbers. I can see the numbers when I close my eyes. It's like a game. Danya Davis looked at the meth pipe sitting next to a pile of Anita Jans's banking documents. It's not a game, Kim. It's a funeral for someone else's future. Chapter 7: The Phantom Psychology. Wheaton, Illinois, 2004. The Wheaton bandit sat in his car 3 blocks away from his next target. He wasn't high. He was focused. He wore a police scanner on his belt, the static a comforting white noise in the morning air. Why did he do it? The FBI thought it was for money. They counted $84,000 in 2003 alone. But the bandit didn't buy luxury cars or expensive jewelry. He lived a quiet life. It's the control. He whispered to his reflection in the rearview mirror. When he entered a bank, he was the center of the universe. Every person in that room obeyed him. Every law was suspended. He felt a surge of adrenaline that was more addictive than any chemical. He indexed his weapon, a habit he couldn't break a sign of his training. He knew the police response times. He knew where the blind spots in the surveillance were. He was a professional playing against amateurs. He hit the credit union in Winfield. 60 seconds, in and out. He ran through the snow, leaving footprints that led to a one-way street. He saw the police cars in the distance, their sirens wailing for a ghost that was already blocks away, blending into the morning commute. He was the Wheaton Bandit, and he believed he would never be unmasked. Chapter 8, The 600-Hour Ordeal. Anita Jan sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by binders. She had been working for 8 months to clear her name. 600 hours, she said to her husband. That's what the experts say it takes. I've spent 600 hours on the phone, writing letters, notarizing documents. I've had to prove I'm me over and over again. Every time she thought she was done, a new collection notice would arrive. A cell phone bill from a state she'd never visited. A car loan for a vehicle she'd never seen. Kimberly Merritt is in jail, Anita said, her voice trembling. But I'm the one doing the time. My credit is a graveyard. She eventually called ID Watchdog. They were a new company, a response to a world where a name was as fragile as glass. We'll take it from here. Anita, the specialist, told her. We'll send the clearance letters. We'll fight the banks. It took a year. A whole year of her life was stolen. Not just the money, the time, the peace, the sense of security. Anita looked at the final clearance letter. It felt like a pardon for a crime she never committed. Chapter 9, The Fall of the Top Dog. Detective Jim Rock finally got the warrant. They moved on Michael Schreckingist's house at dawn. The cameras in the trees saw them coming, but this time, Michael didn't burn the evidence. He was too deep in a meth-induced stupor to notice. The house was a fortress of filth. Printers were humming in every room. Stacks of counterfeit IDs were piled on the coffee table like playing cards. Look at this, Rock said, holding up a convenience check for $25,000. He was going for another bike. Michael was sentenced to 10 years. He went to prison, but the ring he built survived in pieces. For every Michael, there were 100 Tammys and 1,000 Kims. Chapter 10, The Art of Redemption. Today, the community center in Denver is quiet. Tammy Carroll is clean. She has her 3 oldest children back. She works a job that pays a fraction of what she used to steal in a day. But she sleeps at night. I'm using my past to help others, she says, her eyes shining with a different kind of fire now. The road to sobriety isn't easy. It's paved with the mistakes I made when I was a ghost. In Wheaton, the bank tellers still look twice at every man with blue eyes. The signs, no hats, no hoods, no sunglasses are still on the doors. The bandit is gone, but the shadow remains. The war on identity theft hasn't been one. It's just moved deeper into the wires, into the dark corners of the web. But as Virginia Dissett walks into a bank today, she holds her head high. Her name belongs to her again. The paper masks have been torn away, and for the first time in a long time, the truth is the only thing left standing. The end.